Hello, hello, hello. Okay, so quick note. So I have been playing, um, well, not a lot, but over the last few years, I have been playing more solitaire games. I can't say more because all I've really done in tabletop gaming outside of role playing is solo, sports games, a few board games, a couple of board games that were designed for 1 to 4 player co-op play, but they're board games. Um, But stuff like my own game, Big Country Mobster, play tested it, functioned great. Enjoyed a couple of games as I play tested it. I did my tutorial and then moved on to the next project. I didn't really have time to enjoy it or reflect on it. And then yesterday, 2 days ago, I played a game before bed. And then yesterday, I played a game and shared it via video on the channel. And that experience, along with uh WM Akers Lost Star, I think it's called Lost Star, solo uh science fiction game. I picked that up a couple few years ago and have played, I don't know, 4 or 5 sessions of it. They're great little pick up and play solo games. And since I've been playing tabletop sports games, either head to head or solitaire, much of my life, as a kid, no. I didn't play anything solitaire as a kid. Either we didn't have games that supported solitaire play, or I had not had the desire to somehow figure out how to make them a solo game. So if it didn't have a solo component, I wouldn't touch it for solo play. And as a kid, I was surrounded by friends. I mean, I kid you not. I if there was always at least one friend around me. Plus, I had older brothers. And very often we had 4, 5, 6 of us hanging out at my house doing something. And if we weren't actively outside doing something, we were inside doing something. And generally it involved gaming. So solo just was never a need. And then in my 20s, I used PC gaming for surrogate gaming, whether it was role-playing games or sports games on a computer. And then what happened in 95, 94, 95, I got fed up with PC gaming, as I don't know what version of Windows it was at that point. It might have been DOS, maybe the first version of Windows was rolling out, and it was trying to keep up with the specs to continue to play video games. I gave up basically all digital gaming except for a handful of text-based games that would work on whatever version of Windows I had, and those were generally sports games like Dave Cook Action PC Football. I had that on DOS and I transitioned into Windows and I supported that game to get a football fix. But what inevitably happened to me in 95, 96 is I was so frustrated with a lack of play in my life because I was an adult we had 2 businesses and my friends were off married and doing their thing. And I mean, you grow up and you see your friends once a month and you might see them briefly for dinner or something. And or maybe go to an event or something together. But you don't spend every Friday and Saturday and Sunday chilling with your friends before school starts on Monday, right? So, uh, I invented my own football game, again, I wanted to play a tabletop football game because I was exasperated with the experience of digital games. And ultimately, as much as I've loved video gaming and digital gaming, it still is 1/10 of the joy. I much rather play dice, charts, something tangible. I much rather use my imagination, and I had much rather do that than video gaming. Video gaming was only this thing I could squeeze in to burn off stress, as an adult, through the years. And it was easy. You turn it on, you sit down, you kind of zone out, and you burn stress. You kill some time, and you go on with the rest of your day, whatever that is. But in 96, I was the invention is the mother of necessity, right? And so I said, I need to make a solitaire football game that I can play and enjoy. And so that's when I first invented Flash Football. It was called Flash Quarterback. It became Flash Football, and I eventually copywrote it, and I eventually finished it, and I actually published it, and I sold it via my website at the time, Graham Games, all over the world. And I found customers through the sports forums at the time. right? But I didn't have any connection to anybody in the tabletop sports gaming community. I had zero connections to the even to the community. I just arrived one day in the forums and said, "Hey, I got a new game. If anybody's interested," and left. Uh, I sent out review copies to people that I had that people in the said, "Hey, you should send this copy out to Terry. He'll review your game, and send this out to Richard. He'll look at your game. Send this out to Brian." So I sent out my game to people who in the forum communities said would look at my game, but the game was finished, and I got positive feedback for the most part. I overreacted to a gentleman's review when he said this is a great beer and pretzels game, but it's not a serious replay football game. And I, at the time, didn't even know what replay sports football meant. I took the beer and pretzels as a assault upon my baby, and I had a flame out on the forums, and my business had only been open 3 weeks. I was 26 years old, and so that I took personally. And so I no longer do as 55. I've learned a long time ago things aren't personal. That whatever people say is about them. It's rarely about me unless I have perpetrated an activity like punching somebody in the nose. Well, clearly you should take that personally, right? So even that really is probably going to be about, again, that's about me and my inability to control my temper, so to speak, right? So again, you probably shouldn't take me punching you in the nose personally. It's my problem. Unfortunately, you're the one that suffered, right? So we don't want to go through life abusing people and say, "Hey, don't worry about it. You shouldn't be upset by me, my abuse, because it's my problem." The person being abused is going to say, go F yourself, right? My point is this: that led to feedback from customers and community. You need to fix this. You need to add this. You need to do this. And I begrudgingly began to change Flash Football before the thing had been out for a month. People treated it as if it was in the beta stage, right? But it was done. But I begrudgingly put out an update, a rules update. I added charts. I added things to it that all of these people in the community wanted. So ultimately, what happened was instead of playing my game for what it was and accepting it for what it was, they wanted me to edit it into what they wanted it to be. And I obliged because I had never been through this before. I had never, ever put a creation like that. Now, I had made music in the late 80s and 90s, and we would make our music and we would just record it and put it out there on demo tapes. We would send it to, give it to friends and family. We get feedback, but I never paid attention to criticism with our music. Music for me was expression. I'm going to say what I want to say. I'm going to do what I want to do. If you don't like it, don't listen to it. I didn't care. But when it came to this tabletop football game that I'd spent a lot of money because I had to manufacture 1,000 sets of cards, and I had to then buy 1,000 boxes, and I had to print out 1,000 rule books. And so I had this capital invested in it, and I had to package it. So I get an email from my website said, "Hey, um, uh, uh, Philanthropist from Greece, has sent you an order. Here's your 40 bucks at his address." And I would then that morning package it up, shrink wrap it, take it to the mailbox, and ship it to Greece or wherever I was shipping these things. And I'd have to do this every morning. I would check my emails, fill my orders, and on my way to work or school, whatever I was doing at the time, as far as college, I would have to zip by the post office and mail. So you can imagine by the time I sold out in 2003, seven, I don't know, it was like, I don't know how many years, 7 years of selling all those for the most part out. I was tired of it. It's like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I shut down Graham Games and said, I'm not going to do this anymore. Actually, Grand Games went live in like 2001. So it would have been 2 years, maybe 4 years in which I was selling my games. But the point is, I didn't want to ever do that again. So I didn't remanufacture it. It sold out, and that was it. But I designed it for easy play, and I designed it for people to enjoy a football game solitaire quickly with every snap of the game. And I designed what I wanted. I didn't design what other people might like. I did not make for the audience. I did not create for the consumer. I created for me. And if it worked for me, it's done. Maybe others might like it. So imagine my shock and horror when people treated it like a beta and they started telling me what I needed to add or what I needed to fix. And of course that didn't go over. I mean, that went well in the sense that, hey, they're consumers. I don't want to take their $40 and give them something they're not happy with. So I put out like version documents, addendums, and eventually led to Flash Football 2.0, which is mostly what I sold from 2001 to 2003. Okay. All right. The point is, I had never been a solitaire gamer. That was my first foray into solitaire gaming. I actually made my own game to play out, and I'd never role played a solitaire game. I had not played any board games solo. That didn't begin for me until the last 10 years. Did I start buying tabletop board games that could be played cooperatively with 1 to 4 players or by yourself? The Dungeons and Dragons adventure games. Still never crossed my mind to role play solo. It just seemed to me role playing was about a party, a group of human beings, and there was guys who had a role. There was the GM, the referee, and there were the players. So it just never crossed my mind to play solitaire. And even in this late date, in the last few years, when people mention games like Mythic, Ironsworn, games that were designed for co-op or solitaire play, I still ultimately said thanks, but no thanks. I'll stick with board games that are cooperative and easy for me to play alone and have kind of a set window of time. And again, I might, when I'm playing by myself, I might imagine the narrative, but I'm not reciting it out loud. I'm not engaged in it as a role-playing game. I'm engaged in it as an activity. So recently, in playing my own game and in narrating what this must mean, in a way, making sense of the abstractions, coming up with the narrative, the story that explains, the narrative that explains these abstract results, it has opened this kind of idea. And this is just recently when I invented Big Country Mobster, Big Country Boxing, and Big Country Mobster. Now, Big Country Boxing is a sports game. Narrative is there's the narrative can just be, between bouts, what's going on with your boxer, but that's not what it's about. Big Country Mobster is quite literally about random automated results that are so abstracted you have to make sense of them, and it forces you to come up with this connective tissue as to what is really happening. And it's something that when I created that wasn't why I created it. That has been the happy fallout. It's been the happy symptom, the happy, what do I want to say? The happy side effect of the experience of Big Country Mobster. I didn't design it with that intent. I designed it as an abstract game, but I never thought about it. Hey, you're going to connect the tissues to make this thing. And so as I played that game yesterday morning, and I was forced because I'm making a video to make sense of the narrative out loud for the viewer, did it really hit me that this too is emergent story. How I'm making sense of these variables creates an emergent story. But what's fascinating is it's turned me toward the idea of what is solo gaming outside of the mechanics of just rolling dice to determine the issue, and then roll the dice to determine what the variables are, and then roll the dice to determine what the conflict is, and then roll the dice to resolve the conflict, right? This is the gist of all gaming, certainly role play gaming. But it's stopped me in a way dead in my tracks. And so what I do in my tabletop sports games when I announce them on my channel, I'm just narrating what I see in my head as relates to the sport of hockey, football, boxing, whatever, as I make sense of what has occurred between two teams. One team chooses to pass the football, the other team chooses to defend the run. What does that mean? While I understand football well enough to know that the defense was in the wrong defense, they were trying to stop a running play, which means that this pass I'm about to throw means that there's going to be one-on-one coverage, it's going to be wide open. So I can describe what that has to look like because I know football. I played football, I coached football. I'm impassioned about football. So it's easy for me to narrate what that must look like. As I drop the dice, of course, that will determine whether the pass is completed and whether they achieve their success. But I can narrate the beginning of that play. I can make sense of the two teams and the strategic choices they made and narrate what that must look like. And then, of course, I drop the dice to see if it's completed. And then I can narrate the results of the play: complete pass, incomplete pass, intercepted, sacked. So role playing is no different, right? The difference is we receive input from the GM. If you're playing a solitaire role-playing game, we're going to have to get input from something, whether I'm reading a passage in a solo book, like a choose your own adventure book, or whether I'm rolling on a table that tells me what is occurring and that I have to respond to. From that experience, I'm now realizing that because I verbalize it out loud when I make videos, there's a psychological switch that's changing versus what I'm doing when I'm playing by myself. And it's only just recently, again, this may sound silly, but when I play alone, I don't speak out loud, right? You don't talk to yourself. I'm not speaking out loud. I'm not telling the tell out loud. And there is this fascinating psychological thing that I've just recently realized, wait a minute, when I play my football games or I play whatever I do by myself offline and I'm just jotting it down or I'm writing notes, um, it's almost as if, right? What is it? Schroet, is it I can't remember the name of the physicist, but Schopenhauer, short. I can't remember the cat, but the cat in the box, right? There's always an observer. And I realized when I'm speaking out loud, it changes in a way how I'm processing the data and the narrative closer to an actual role-playing experience. In other words, filling in a way that gap that's not there in a solitaire game, right? That verbalizing it out loud for some other observer, whether it be my consciousness or the people at the table. And I just realized this recently, and it's kind of a fascinating idea. So if we're creating games or I'm playing games, I think it's probably going to be fascinating when I write Space Age of Man and work on Space Age of Man with Dell. And I'm sitting here quietly alone at my desk writing, or I'm sitting at that table playtesting the mechanics of Space Age of Man. The idea of doing it, as silly as it may sound, out loud is going to probably inform my consciousness more than just rolling dice, tabulating math, and making sure it functions. It's probably going to impart almost like reading a work. When I was in college, I would read the work, but not until I read it out loud would I catch things, and not until my wife read it and then read it out loud for me to hear it. What I see, oh, I see what's wrong with that paragraph of that sentence. When my wife or a student that I was in the library with would read my work out loud to me, would you catch things? And I think I'm sure there's studies on this, and I'm sure there's some psychological event that's happening that I'm just completely idiot. I'm ignorant of. Um, so again, it comes back to this idea I've talked about recently about communication. I'm most concerned about communicating effectively so people aren't frustrated with the rules or they're not frustrated with something I didn't say and their character ended up dead. And it was because I really wasn't a good communicator or whatever. I didn't communicate thoroughly, right? Assumption risk, it's called. I tell them about two guards walking down the street, and the thief says, I'm gonna take out one of those guards, but I didn't describe the guard appropriately. He is suited in heavy armor. He's wielding a heavy weapon, and he wears the insignia of a captain. I failed to describe those things, and they embrace them in combat, and they find out they are grotesquely under that I did not properly describe the quality of this enemy, and it waylaid them. And whose fault's that? Right? The GM. It's my fault because that's paramount. So they don't have assumption risk, right? So anyway, I was thinking about this in just in relationship to us beginning process on Space Age of Man, but also in that I've got this newfound joy for the solo experience that I've enjoyed it as an event. I've enjoyed it as an activity, but only recently have I begun to say, wait a minute, there might be something really rewarding about solo tabletop gaming that I have missed beyond just activity, something a little more interesting there going on as far as feeling the level of engagement or immersion. And I often get this in tabletop sports games. I get caught up in the game that I'm announcing, but only generally 99% of the time when I actually record it for an audience. When I just sit to play quietly my tabletop football game, it becomes machinations. It becomes me going through the process of finishing a game. the kickoff, the plays, the halftime, the breaks, and then final score. But boy, when I sit down to share it with an audience, it really does change the level of immersion and engagement in the activity as I'm attempting to process what I see in my head for somebody else's advantage, to express it to an audience, to another human being, to enjoy it at the level that my imagination is going. And it even heightens my own enjoyment of the imagination, right? Because when I play it, I'm visualizing football. When I'm cave dwelling in a D&D session, I'm there, I'm visualizing it. I'm listening to the GM and I'm listening to my players and I'm processing data. And it's out there. It's out loud. I'm now finding out that this might well be a tool to improve my solitaire gaming. Although my wife will probably be disturbed by hearing me in here quietly in my den playing a game in the morning that isn't being recorded. To hear me mumbling to myself might be disturbing to my wife, but it might heighten the solitaire experience. And this comes back around to what co-op games as board games must, again, elicit: the sharing out loud of the events. And therefore, this leads to the idea of what a GM-less game, not so much solitaire, but GM-less, needs and requires for, I think, a certain heightened level of shared imagination, right? People that, and again, I'm speaking completely as guesswork here, as I have not played a GM-less game with other human beings. I've played solitaire games, which you could argue are GM-less, but I can imagine GM-less experience is heightened with six voices contributing, depending on how the mechanics of the game elicit their narrative feedback, right? And this is something that I've always spurned. I don't want to do writer room gaming. I've talked about it before. I don't want Dark Age of Man to be writer room gaming. I want the player to be free to create, but I don't want this to be I don't want this to be a negotiation of how the scene must resolve. That's a problem, and I still think imagining it now would be a problem for me. But yet, when I played my game, Big Country Mobster, yesterday, I had that external dialogue out loud in which I had to work out the emergent story of the narrative and how much more rewarding the next event in his life was because I made sense of the events to that point. Something I'm sure we all take for granted. And maybe when you play quietly a solitaire game, you're doing that. I find myself just going through the process. And this has been something that I've also recently discovered as I'm proofreading material, our material, etc., trying to recognize what, I almost want to say this out loud to see how it's going to work for everybody involved. And I almost have to say it out loud because it's too internalized in my head when I'm reading it. And it's an interesting tool, I think. And how relevant is it to role playing? I don't know. But I think it's part of why we enjoy role playing games because it's out loud. It's not just in your head. It is out loud. You are required to say something. You are required to describe something. You are required to then take action or partake. And that's where we make the switch. That's where we switch from the process to the engagement, I think. And anyway, it's an interesting realization I've had in the last, I don't know, few weeks, certainly in playing non-sports solo games. Um, Realizing that when I play them by myself, it's an activity, it's a process, and I don't dislike it, or I would do it. It's a pastime. But the minute I share it out loud, live, it changes, and that has never I've never quite thought about it that way. So, all right, everybody out there, have a great week. I think it's great Tuesday. Yeah, everybody have a wonderful week and enjoy what you do and do what you love. Bye bye.